heads as we pray. Father God in heaven, we are grateful and we're thankful for an opportunity to come together today. We ask that you will bless each and every one of us that is here. I pray that as we listen and as we learn, that you will just continue to bless us and help us to be inspired with the knowledge that we are about to receive. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Milimo, all over to you.
Thanks, Max, and good morning to everybody. I'm currently in the Lake District, so I'm in a bit of a different location, hence why it looks a bit like a hotel behind me. So really good to be here. The title of today's presentation is around Money Follows Mission. And I think it's a very important discussion for us to have. I know that Max has, really great plans for, this particular department. And so I'm really happy to share my experience. I just want to give a bit of background on myself. So you know where I'm coming from. So for the last 10 years, I've worked for ADRA, which is our, Adventist Development and Relief agency charity. But just in the last few months, I've actually stopped working with ADRA and I started to work for a new organization called Development Media International. During my time at ADRA, I had a few roles, but in order to kind of be a bit more distinct about them, I had a role which was around business development, where I would look and identify funding for our countries and developing countries, and then I would also project manage the grants once we got them. So I've had quite a bit of experience around understanding how donors and funders think. Predominantly, my experience is international development, and with the new role that I'm doing, it's also the same thing as well, in which I'm part of the business development team, and it's my job to identify funding, especially from institutional and government donor funding. So that's a little bit around my background, my, I guess, professional or career experience. But I think in terms of my passion, I've always, just had a heart for ministry. And I remember when I started with ADRA, there was a lot of people in the church would say, oh, that's amazing, that your work is going to be mission focused. And I remember thinking, how? Because I didn't see the work that we did to be mission focused, because, we would access funding from, government donors, we were operating as a charity, we were, complying to many of, the government and donor contracts. And so it felt, very professional, like a company, for example. But I learned over the years that the more I worked with ADRA, that actually the mission is the mission in which God has called us to do, and how that mission is delivered. It's in different ways, and I think sometimes you can put ourselves in a box and allow ourselves to think that there's only one way in which we can deliver the mission. But actually, we can work with others, we can partner with others, we can receive external funding to extend our mission and our mission, and to have even a bigger and wider impact. And so that is what I'll be presenting today. It's not specifically going to be around fundraising, and I'll just move on now to the objectives of what I'm going to share. In essence, what I want to be able to do is just to provide a bit of an overview to you and, as ACS teams, what you need to consider when you are applying for external funding. And I promise that I won't make it too technical, but the idea is, what I want to do is I want to challenge you. I want to help you understand exactly what it is funders are looking for. And actually it's quite simple, and I think very often maybe can appear to be a little bit scary, but once you understand exactly how a funder thinks, then it becomes much easier to be able to create and develop an application in which you can be able to meet their needs. And I just want to be able to share any knowledge that I have, and I really welcome questions, and I really welcome a discussion around this. So I promise it won't be technical, but it'll be an introduction and perhaps a challenge, and help you to think a bit more broader around the opportunities and funding that could be available to you and how you can start to prepare for those. So I think maybe a starting point would be really to understand exactly what you are currently doing. I'd like to know a little bit more about the type of projects that you're working on, whether you are receiving any external funding, whether you are working with any external partners. Do you have a strategy? Just so it can help me kind of guide my presentation today. It gives me a bit of benchmark in terms of where you're at. So it'd be really great. You don't have to put your camera on if you don't want to, but it'd be really great if you could unmute and just share a little bit with me about what you're doing at the moment with your ACS teams. Who wants to go first? Anyone willing to share a little bit around the work that you're doing currently in your communities or with your church?
Perhaps Sister Liz Kavanagh can briefly share some of the 6B, because I know she's the secretary, and also Sister Dates is the 6A president, so she can share a little bit about what's going on in the area.
That would be great.
And we've got Mike or Mitch at the food bank.
Yes, I can see. Yeah, food bank. Yeah.
Okay, Sister Dates here.
Hi, Sister Dates.
Hello,
I know you really well.
Excellent. Now I'm excited really, because some of 6A churches, they've started a hub. They've started a food bank, and a very small church, which is Lighthouse, they found a very good spot where the local authority rent part of a upstairs of a Chinese restaurant and put the homeless there. And now they are supplying these people with meals on a Sunday. And I'm hoping they can move on from Sunday to weekdays as well. And also Tottenham West Green Road, they're doing a marvelous job. They've invited other community to come in with them. And also New Life has started a food bank as well. Only we need to know where we can get some outside funding. And that's just a few of the church. And also Anstead have started an excellent program where they're feeding the community. They're taking hot meal to those who can't come out, and they're doing a very good job.
Yeah.
But we're going to need funding. We need to know where to go to get this funding.
Okay.
Good.
So just to confirm, Sister Date, so none of the churches that you're aware of in 6A are receiving any external funding or working with partners. It's just being funded purely by the church.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sure of that. Yes.
Okay, then good morning, all brothers and sisters. In following Sister Dates' comments there, like herself, I would say in the 6B area, we have not really, well, what is the word, tried or experimented or investigated a great deal the business about external funding. External partners would really come under the Fair Share banner, plus the fact, as you say, local churches sometimes are having to provide funds for their food hubs and food banks in the 6B area that I'm aware of. There are some churches that I'm not that connected to in the 6B area, but so I'm not quite sure what their opportunities are. But the ones that I'm connected to and have information on, we do have some churches that have really worked hard. They've been ongoing for a while, even before the COVID. I mean, the Brixton Church has been quite prominent and forward as I said before, you know, and I think sometimes depending on the leadership in the various churches, how things make good progress. And then we also have, let me have to think now, I mean, Croydon also, they have, you know, been able to do a very good hub. I don't want you to hurry it. Yeah, sorry. Anyway, Croydon, Croydon I was talking about, very good hub indeed. Also, West Croydon are making good progress. That is Love Thy Neighbour. They have a title, Love Thy Neighbour, the West Croydon group. And also Sydenham and Greenwich Church, they have the same pastor, so they've joined forces together, and they've been doing very well they operate out of the Greenwich Church, and theirs is Fish and Loaves Food Bank. So I think the stepping stones that we're already on is really very good indeed, and people are very willing, and the churches, to support this particular type of program. But yes, I think getting to the external funding, especially the hows, the whys and wherefores, that would really give us another step up the ladder. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I can see that Mick has also been sharing in the chat food banks. I'm not sure which area this is for, but food banks, youth projects, shelter at Christmas. And then some of the area food banks are supported by the council with food and funds. Oh, all areas have food banks. Okay, that's pretty good. That's really excellent. Just one more question before we move on. Are you aware of any churches that have been able to start any projects post-COVID? So, you know, an opportunity, for example, came during the COVID, and as a result of that, you were able to start doing additional, or, you know, a new type of service in the community. And do you know if any of the churches are part of an ADRA hub?
Is that for Area 6B, for everybody? Or can I answer?
Yeah.
Okay, so post-COVID, Area 6D, we have got Chiswick Church, which basically started, you know, a charity. They have made a charity, and they've made efforts, and they have got some money from the Ealing Hounslow Council, some funds that have enabled them to get some fridge and something else, a laptop. And so they have partnered with Hounslow Shelters, volunteers. So that is the during COVID and post-COVID as well.
Okay.
This is Chiswick SDA Church. Also post-COVID, we have the Hanwell Church, which partnered with the Neighbourly. The Neighbourly has given some funds, about £400, to get some food. This is after the ADRA, Barclays Bank funds.
Yeah.
So the you know, the community ministry has managed to partner with the Neighbourly, and they have now got access to Lidl. Those are the goods, Lidl shops. They get food from the Lidl shops all over the place, but they have got some funds given. Okay. So also, Hanwell to Hanwell is also a charity which is functioning at the Hanwell SD Church, and it is that's where it is staged, but it is operating widely. Okay. So Hanwell to Hanwell started a project which was post-COVID as well, and that project is catering for mothers with their single mothers with children who are below 16 years of age. And basically got volunteers who take the food to the mothers at their doorsteps. So at the moment that's not got any money from outside, but got money from the ADRA hub,
Yeah.
That got some funds from the Adra Hub, but the outside money was from the community ministry itself, the Hanwell, that was from the council.
Okay.
Basically, the neighboring from the neighboring, they got the money from there.
Okay, that's really positive.
And Wisden Church, also Wisden SDA Church has managed to get some pattern with the faith-based groups. So they work in partnership with them. Probably I should also mention that the Felix is one of the partners, the outside partners. We partner with them in terms of them giving us food and also linking us to other places like the temple. We have a great temple in Slough that they've linked us to. And the Slough temple is called a Gurdwara, has got lots of things that we can explore there. They are calling us to go and listen to their training. And they've given us like sometimes pallets, like 4 pallets, 6 pallets of stuff, and it was quite a lot. So we have managed to share with other people who are outside of area 6D. Some were mangoes, potatoes, rice, and wheat, and we have shared, and that was with other people outside area 6D. But that temple is a potential for the church to explore, because they have some trainings there. We don't know where they get their food, but it is in plenty, because when they called us to go, they had 80 pallets of rice. So maybe the church can look into that one, but that is coming from the Felix. They have actually partnered with Hanwell to Hanwell, and they have enabled us to go over there.
Yeah, that's really excellent. So, this sharing is not just for myself to have an idea of where the churches are, but I think it's also good to share with each other. I'm really pleased to hear that, Hanwell and Chiswick have started to set up an independent charity. And I think that could potentially be the blueprint for the future Adventist community services. So that's really, really helpful. Thank you for sharing that. I think, it could be worth maybe Max having a look at how they're doing that and using that as a template. So thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to move on to talk a little bit about, sorry, just want to go to the next slide. The new computer. Okay, here we go. So I just want to give a little bit of context around where we are in the UK in terms of our funding landscape. So, from since 2010, when, the government brought in, this austerity program, we know that local authorities have faced a severe shortage in funds. An average of something like 49.1% reduction in grants has been estimated between, what is available centrally and then what is divulged to those locally over an 8-year period between 2010 and 2018. So you can imagine that, local council budgets have really seen a complete slash. Again, with coronavirus coming in, it's brought more pressure not on just the central government, but also on the councils. So there's expected to be even further cuts to the local councils. And one of the concerns is that when local authorities are experiencing cuts, then what they start to do is they cut away on what they would consider to be non-statutory services and focus on the statutory. And even then, we're expecting to see even further cuts moving forward. So there are concerns around the long-term, effects of austerity, which is now being further exaggerated and exacerbated by COVID. And I've got some stats there to really show, as a whole, what is going on in our country. So, number of households that are assessed as homeless or in temporary accommodation has increased across the country by 33.9%. The number of looked after children has grown by 10.9%, and the number of people in need of care over the age of 65 has increased by 14.3%. And I'm pretty sure that if we were to look at this data again in next year or two, it's going to be, you know, on the continued rise. So there is definitely there a concern around the funding that is available at the council. So I am pleased to hear that, you know, some of our ACS teams have been able to access council services, but they may find that it becomes increasingly more difficult to do so, which is why looking for external funding outside of that could be the way forward. So I just want to address this from the outset. You know, there is this assumption that faith-based institutions are not necessarily having the same value in society as they did in the past. We're looking at, you know, the fact that we are a postmodernist society. We're looking at the fact that, you know, religion doesn't seem to be a high priority in our communities, and then perhaps maybe, you know, faith-based institutions don't have a role. But this is completely incorrect. Actually, faith-based institutions are viewed very important to the government, and they actually viewed as key social action players. And so I think there is definitely a role, an increasing role, especially with what's happening with the country around cuts, for faith-based institutions to play a part in filling the gaps where local authorities have not been able to. So I've just got some data that I want to share with you. So there was a survey that was conducted, and admittingly, this is not recent data. It has been difficult to find recent data around the role that churches have been playing, or faith-based institutions have been playing in the UK. But around 2013, there was a survey that was conducted, and what we was able to see was that was a 36% increase over the last 2 years. So I guess that would be something like 2011 to 2013. On the number of local social initiatives that were coming out of churches. And so even despite the economic problems that were happening, you know, and the impact of the austerity measures, funds were being donated from UK churches, and they were increased by 19% across those 2 years. I think another figure I just want to highlight as well is that the total contribution of social initiatives by the church, which was totaled around 2013, equal to 2.5 billion, which was about 33% of, you know, like the charity sector funds that were floating around in the UK. So 33% is quite a high percentage. So, you know, UK churches are having a significant role, and probably even now, if we were to look at the figures, an even more significant role. So I want to highlight that there is a place, and we shouldn't be nervous as a faith-based organisations to go and present ourselves to funders and to donors and to ask and access funding, because we are seen to be key and important players in society. So I want to just be a bit more specific and talk about the benefits that the Seventh-day Adventist Church has as a social action player. And I think there is a benefit that we have that perhaps we don't recognize, or maybe we take for granted. So, you know, if you think about the church structure that we have, I think that's our biggest selling point. And by the way, sorry, if you have any questions, you can ask me as I'm going along. Feel free to put your hand up, feel free to unmute, and you can ask me questions and we can have a discussion, okay? So in terms of the church structure of the SDA Church, it actually really miniatures a company. We've got a board, and this is at a local church level. So we've got a board, we've got a church clerk, we've got a treasurer, we have business meetings. All of our business meetings are documented and noted. We've got departments, and we've got officers within those departments. And then outside of that structure is then we have a supportive institutional structure. So we've got area coordinators, and then we've got a directors and administration staff at the South England Conference that support it. These are the type of structures that funders absolutely love. Why? Because it shows that we have accountability in our organization, and it shows that we also have the structures in place that we are able to manage the funding. And so there is a lot of added value. Another thing that funders are very much interested in is something called match funding, which means that as a church, because we are already running ACS in our churches and funding it ourselves, we can actually say to them, look, we can provide a match funding or a contribution towards the project. That's always attractive. In addition to that, there are also in-kind contributions that we can provide that if you look at it, it's not money, but it has, you know, a financial value to it. Our structure makes us low risk because we have the structure to manage the compliance. And as I said, there's accountability to it. Our church is already registered, or at least the conference is already registered as a charity. We've got access to a diverse skill set of volunteers at the ready, and that's our officers, our members, who are highly skilled. We are located in the heart of the community, which means we're positioned very well. We've got the buildings, we've got the equipment, so, you know, we're ready to go pretty quickly. But also we've got that long-term presence in the community. And this is what makes us to be a strong player and an attractive partner for funders. And I just wanted to emphasize that, because these are the unique selling points that we want to be able to present in our applications to funders. And this is something that would just tick, you know, many boxes in our applications. So I want to emphasize that. Any questions at this point before I move on? Okay, so understanding the funder. So the UK is quite saturated with charities. There was 169,000 charities in the UK, which is quite a lot. And the income that is, you know, available or which charities are using is something like £84 billion. So if we were looking at it in terms of a cost per charity, it's something like £495. Now, of course, that's not the case. There are charities that are accessing much smaller pots of money. There's charities that are accessing much larger pots of money. But I've put this data in to emphasize that there is money available. We think there isn't money, but there is money available. Each funder has their own set of priorities. And the great thing about that is that once you understand exactly what the priorities are for the funder, it's very easy to be able to match and to have a match yourselves between yourself and the funder. So, you know, you don't need to, it doesn't make sense, for example, to apply for a funder that is interested in, for example, doing sports in the community if you're wanting to run a homeless shelter. And so funders are very transparent from the beginning what it is they're looking for. And I believe that there are a lot of funders that are looking for partners like ACS that have this, you know, countrywide presence, but are also located in the community and understand exactly the needs of the community. Maybe also another thing just to highlight as well around the funders is that during the COVID pandemic, what we noticed is that a lot of funders were wanting to fund an increasing number of COVID projects, but through their existing partnerships and networks. There were some new organizations and there were new partners that were brought on, but they also utilized the existing partnerships because they were known, they were familiar, and they understood their capacity. And this is why networking is very, very important. And this is why reputation is very important. But we'll go on to talk about that next. So I'm just going to check the chat. Okay, no questions. All right, so project design. Now, the project design aspect is really, really important because this is what you will be utilizing to present to your funder. There are different ways in which you can do it, and there are different types of questions that may come up. But what I have done is just focused on some of the key and repetitive areas that come up in a funder's application. So evidence of need and your target group. Now you'll notice that I put evidence. I think we all understand the needs in our community, you know, especially as ACS teams. You know, a lot of the teams have been established. The ACS department has been established for many years now, doing great work in the community. But now you have to be able to evidence it. So you have to be able to show that you know and you understand it. And so it is looking for that data. it is having conversations with the council, it's having conversations with other local leaders, it's even having conversations with the target groups. But it's really important that we're able to demonstrate and evidence that we know who we're wanting to target, and we understand what their needs are, and that we can provide evidence. And if you look on the council website, there's always lots of reports and data that can back it. But it's also good to check in. And I remember an example of a friend of mine that was looking for funding for her local church. And you know, as a church, that our biggest strength is health. And so the church wanted to do a health program, but when she called the council said, actually, our health data in this borough is pretty good. Actually, what we really need support is around education services, for example. And so then the church then needed to change their approach and focus on education. So that evidence is really important. On intervention, can you justify your intervention, that your intervention is the best intervention for this target group? So there are many ways in which you can be able to work and support that target group, but why that particular intervention? And that's what you have to be able to think about and justify. And these are things that we just do. But now when you're presenting it to a funder, you need to think about and explain that. The next one is around scale. And so if you had more money, what would you do differently? Or what would you do the same? Or what would you do more of? And that's a very important question. Sometimes we think, if we had more money, and for example, we were doing a food bank, then instead of serving 50 people every week, we want to serve 100 people. Okay, yeah, that's true. And that sounds smart. But then you could also think about, well, if we had extra money, we could maybe run a food bank and maybe a clothing bank at the same time. So scale isn't just about increasing the numbers. So scale can sometimes be, and this also moves on to the next one, it could also be around also being innovative, maybe using external funding to try something different, try something new. So you have your core intervention, which you'll continue to run, but you can maybe start a new project or expand your project. And that would be very attractive to a funder. And also, we also have to think that if we're thinking about scaling up and innovation, then what additional resources and tools will we need to have in place in order for us to do so? Monitoring and evaluation is a really, really key one, which every funder is asking for. And I guess it kind of links a bit to accountability, but we are asked ourselves to be able to monitor and evaluate our project. How can we track our project's progress and prove that the project is having an impact? When we receive feedback from our target group, so if we're working with a homeless shelter and we receive feedback from some of the homeless people that we are supporting, how do we adjust or change our intervention to be able to accommodate their needs? And this is something that we've been asked to do internally. And for those churches that have an ADRA hub, they will know that this is something that ADRA, I'm sure, has been talking to you about. And there are two aspects of monitoring. There's monitoring that you need to do yourself so that you can continue to track your progress, but there's also the monitoring that the funder will do for you. So this is something that is really important to think about. It's not complicated at all. It's just about thinking, how can we prove that this is working? And how do we show that we're adaptable? That's what it is, really. Sustainability is another big thing which all funders are talking about, which is how do you ensure that impact or the effect of your project will continue after the funding has been finished? And I think there are very simple ways of us to be able to demonstrate that. And I think ACS is a perfect, because, the church remains in the community, the services were there beforehand and will continue after, maybe not on that scale, or maybe you will find other funders and other partners to join. But they want to know, they want to ensure that their funding isn't just we've helped you now, and then, when we've walked away, you've gone back to where you are. What we want to know is that we've helped the target group, and actually, as a result of helping them, they have continued to progress in this particular direction. Budget and value for money is also very important. Funders want to know that the majority of your budget is going to support the services or the project for that target group, but you've also got to demonstrate value for money. So, you know, sometimes funders do something called a cost analysis, but in essence, what you're really wanting to say is that this approach and this cost is the best price for this approach. But I just want to highlight that cheapness does not necessarily mean value for money. Value for money means that this is the best approach for this budget and for this target group. Again, it's not something difficult to justify, but it is something that you do need to think through. And it's really good to think about it in a project design, because you may realize that your current approach or the way that you are doing things now could be refined, could be improved by maybe taking a better value for money approach. So it's good, this process of project design, it might seem technical, it might seem long, but actually it's a really good way of being able to refine your ideas and making sure that the project that you are proposing is really the best project for your target group. I'm not going to say much about added value and resources, except for it's really important to think about how you're going to resource that project. And then the last point again is, you know, around accountability, and, you know, how will you prove that, you know, you have an accountability structure? And I think the church already has that, as I said, from the way that we are structured, you know, and you can utilize, you know, your business meetings and your board meeting minutes, etc., as a way of holding you to account. You know, you'll have a project plan which says, you know, over the next 6 months or 1 year, this is what the project wants to achieve, and you just make a note of it whenever you have meetings and so that accountability mechanism is already in the church. We just need to be able to explain it to our funder. I'm going to pause a minute to see if there are any questions. I know I've kind of whizzed through a project design kind of structure, but are there any questions about what I've shared so far? Okay, so then I'll continue. So visibility of ACS in the community is very important, and I'm pretty sure that, you know, your ACS teams are pretty visible. But the reason I want to highlight this is because the reputation of the church and of ACS in the community really does matter, and it matters to funders. So if you are applying, for example, a national funder who doesn't know anything about the Adventist Church or anything about ACS, what it's very likely that they will do is that they'll get in touch with your local borough, your local councillor, or, you know, local leaders, and you know, they're very likely to ask about this organization. So, you know, it's really important, you know, to have the visibility of your organization, of the ACS. So how you have your visibility is really up to you. It could be by what you wear, or it could be about having signs or, you know, posters up that really emphasize, you know, who you are. I'm so sorry. I know that this part, I was trying to put a lot of information to the slides. So I know here that the slides are a little bit, the text is a bit small. So I'm just going to talk you through the main points, and I'm happy to also share this presentation with you after, that you can look at it more closely. One thing I do want to pull out from this slide as well is around, you know, what is your ACS brand? I'm going to ask a question here and ask, do any of your ACS teams have a brand? Something that is, you know, very characteristic, that when you're moving around in the community, when people see you, they know that this is ACS, or they know that you are from the Adventist Church. Anyone? Any examples of where you feel the church or ACS has a very clear brand in any of the communities that we are working in?
I think Handwell to Handwell might have such a, because I know that they've got community members that sit on their board, and so they're quite integrative. I don't know if Sarah, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
While we're waiting, what I could say is our uniform, the community services or ACS uniform, you know, that's you know, the more of our members that could be, well, I'll rephrase that. No, the uniform definitely has an impact in the community. And when I know that when the Sydenham and Greenwich Church were out in the community, one of the ladies, community services ladies, was wearing her uniform, and people were impressed about it. And I have heard from, you know, our dear Sister Saul from past days that she always advocated that the uniform was a very good publicity in the community. Wherever you're going, whoever you're seeing, even if you just want to wear it a day and you're going around Lewisham Shopping Centre or any shopping centre, that people will see a uniform that is identifying where we're coming, that can identify where we're coming from.
Yeah, so I'm from the same church. My home church is the same as Sister Dates, and my memory of Sister Dates when I was a child is that Sister Dates were in a uniform, which I always thought was kind of very similar to like the Salvation Army uniform. And so, you know, when I think of community services now, I still think of the uniform because it was so impressionable to me as a child. And so, you know, what you wear is a very quick and obvious way of, you know, branding and having an association with you know, and helping give more visibility to your work. Mick is also just putting in the chat as well around part finders, which is very true. I think part finders in a uniform and the drums in the street, that's also, you know, that's the part finder brand in the community. And for the churches that do have, you know, a drum corps, you know, that has been that. So, you know, but there are other ways. It doesn't just have to be about what you wear. It could also be around your level of activity, or it could be, you know, posters or signposting or etc. etc. But thank you so much for sharing that. I wanted somebody to give an example because I want us to start thinking with our individual teams how we can strengthen our brand and have more visibility in the community, because that is what will be the intel that will be fed back to funders, and that could be the game changer that helps you to access funding because you are known and recognized in the community, and that makes you a very attractive partner. I have a question from Mick, which is, do I have a list of funders who we can access apart from the Council and Barclays? I don't have a prepared list. Looking for funding is quite a detailed task. So I don't have one to go, but it can be done. I think one of the, let me get to the end, because my next slide is going to talk about partnerships as well. And I think that could be another way of, you know, working with others to identify funding. So let me move on and talk a little bit on that point. Yeah, I agree, Mick, also as well, using the SDA logo is also a point of visibility. I had thought that ACS had its own logo. Am I correct, Max, or did I get that wrong? Oh,
yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Pastor Max, I'm a bit confused about we are using this word ACS, but I'm not sure that the local, you know, all the local churches are aware of it. And I'm not even sure if it's really brought down to us that, excuse me, can we now use this ACS, well, logo? We're still community services, aren't we?
No, Sister Dave here.
Yeah, go.
Pastor, could you please explain to my dear sister, area community service? The ACS is not a branch of anything. It's the area community service, Sister dear. So it's still the community service. And anyhow, what I suggest to some of the street workers is to wear the fluorescent jacket with the Advent church logo. And that's what some of them is using.
The more we wear it in various ways, the more prominent it's going to be out there in the community.
Mm-hmm.
Max, are you there to respond?
Sorry, I was just sending a message privately. The internet isn't very great. It keeps kicking me out, so I'm not picking up all of the the points
Hey.
of
Oh,
discussion.
sorry, Max.
Sharing
We're just talking about
things that what you're doing now, you know, getting out in fresh air, give that immune system. Was that your daughter? Sorry?
Thanks, Max. So we're just having a conversation around ACS, the term. Is it Adventist Community Services? And also, I was underneath the impression, but there's no evidence to it, that there was an ACS logo. And so the question is, can the teams now be using the ACS logo, or are we using the church's SDA logo? What visibility, I guess, item or material are we putting out there in terms of logo?
Yeah, so there has been and this is actually, it speaks to your point, Milimo, because the ACS brand is absolutely very, very strong. A while back, my understanding is that the name in the UK only had changed from Adventist Community Services to Adventist Community Ministries to make it clearer what the community services was doing. I think one of the main reasons for this was that when people did contact people on the outside, when you say community services, their main thought goes to probation work and those who are in that sort of area. And so the decision was taken by the SEC Executive Committee to change the wording. However, as I've said, because the branding is so strong, services has still stuck. I'm in the process of still, I've been asked to clarify the precise wording of it, which I'm still waiting on from conference. So I've stuck with, as you've seen with the logo, the ACS4 now, but technically it is correct that it should be Community Service Ministry, Adventist Community Ministries, sorry.
Okay.
So it is confusing, but it serves as a cautionary tale and a good case study to make your point proven.
Okay, thank you. I wondered if I got it wrong because I have ACS all over the presentation. But I think it's good to clarify because some of the teams were asking the question. Okay, perfect. I'm going to move on to talk about partnership. I see something in the chat. So let me just read what Mick is saying. Traditional SDA are reluctant to join partnerships. The leadership of the church needs to give more guidelines and produce a list of credible charities and organizations that we can safely partner with due to our faith and ethos. Okay, let's talk about partnerships. That's what's next. How do I get to next screen? Go, go, go. Here we go. Okay. So what do I want to say about partnerships? So I kind of want to sell why partnerships are really important. I don't know if I really need to, because I think we all know that working with others has many benefits, but I think there's also benefits of working with others in the local community. I think it's about bringing our different strengths together. I think it's about combining our experience and capacity as well. I think it increases accountability to the donor and transparency, because the more organizations that you have working together, the more there is going to be, that kind of shared processes of how things, should work. We should most definitely, as, a church, be leading on this whole community spirit and working in partnerships with others. Very often, we're working in the communities and we're working towards the same goals and objectives of other organizations. So it just makes sense to partner together. In addition, when you have partners that are joining together, you're actually able to access a bigger pot of money because your donors actually prefer to fund one consortium partnership with 5 or 6 or even 8 players on board rather than funding individuals. So the donors actually do like a partnership approach. It's a great way of learning from others. It's a great way to empower our local community services rather than wanting to compete with each other. And it's just less administration for the donor. So partnerships are very, very important. But I do understand the point that has come from Mick in the chat, around convincing and working with, you know, church leadership to be able to, for them to see partnerships to be favorable. And I'll say this thing, you know, I specifically wanted to talk about the benefit of faith-based organizations and, you know, churches being seen as a favorable partner. We are not being asked as a funder to, as a partner, sorry, to compromise on our beliefs or on our work ethics. Partner, you know, the funder is picking us because there are many advantages to us as a church and us having teams and our location. And so I think it's a very traditional view, as Mick has said, a very traditional view that partners, you know, receiving external funding will compromise our ethos, which is not the case. And there are many other Christian institutions that are receiving funding and are allowed to maintain their ethos in place. And so I have not yet come across a situation where they have been asked, an organization or a faith-based organization has been asked to compromise on their beliefs. That is not the case at all. Sarah, I believe you've got a question. Sarah, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
She may be indisposed because they're handing out books at the same time. So
okay, that's fine. That's no problem. We'll continue and then she can come back to it at the end. Okay, let's move on. Ooh, I'm running out of time and I have to leave my location soon. So I wanted to ask this question, but I don't know if we really have time to go into it. So maybe I'll put the question on the table for something to think about, which is, how do we utilize the resources in our church pool to support the ACS engine? And what I mean about that is that, you know, ACS is, you know, our community arm, our community action department of our church. And I know that, you know, each ACS department has its own team and its core members, but you also have other members that are in your church that are highly skilled. So you have people that are working, you know, in their professional jobs as project managers, or working as accountants or finance managers, or in creative roles. And my question is, how do you utilize, you know, the skill sets that you have in your church to be able to build and grow your ACS department? I really see ACS to not just be a department, but I see it to be really at the forefront of the church. And although you may have your own core team, it just makes sense as well that when it is and as needed, that, you know, you do bring on board the support and utilize the resources in your local church. So for example, you may not have anyone in your team that would be good at or feel comfortable writing perhaps maybe a funder's application, but there may be somebody else in your church who has, you know, the skill sets to do it. Bring them in, borrow them, ask them to come on board and be part of that. And I know that it's a challenge. I know it's hard to get people to commit, but I really believe if that we were to utilize our network within the our churches more widely, we would actually be able to do more and engage more and be able to, you know, successfully secure funding. Just a few more slides left, and I'm going to take some questions at the end. So I started off the presentation just talking about, you know, the situation in country, you know, austerity measures that the government have brought in since 2010, and, you know, the cuts that have been made, you know, to local authorities, and how faith-based institutions and using external funding can help to fill those gaps, and highlighting the importance of the role and what ACS could actually do. And I just want to share some quotes with you because I think it kind of helps us with this concept of
money leading and supporting the mission. It is a non-statutory services that are demonstrating the most added value to community cohesion at this time. Churches deliver social action because the Bible calls them to, but also because it is a practical way of demonstrating God's love and blessing others. Being expected to provide such provision to make up for the state's failing is not a job that churches should be comfortable with or want. The work of churches should never be seen as a cheap alternative to the state. And I want to highlight this to say, yes, it shouldn't be a cheap alternative to the state. And although it is not the responsibility of the church, it is definitely something in which the church can do and be able to contribute towards. But there is no cheap alternative to be able to fill in these gaps. And as a church, we do need to be more comfortable. We do need to be more open to exploring and bringing in external funding, because we want to be able to provide good quality services. We want to be able to meet the needs, and we want to also show that we are still relevant in 2021 in our communities. And so we have this call to social action. We have this call to helping and doing more for others, but we also need the resources to do so. And we need to start to think more broadly around how we can continue to be such an important player in our communities in the years coming ahead. This is my last slide, and this is just an idea that I just want to leave and float with you to just think about with your teams. And that's a consideration of seeing ACS as a not-for-profit organization. And again, it's building on this concept that, we need money for the mission. And the question is there a bigger role the church can play in the community? And, could ACS, as Max says, with all of its strength and its capacity, could it be run as parallel, but even independently as a company alongside the church, in which you are able to, be able to access funds, and the funds that you receive, and I deliberately call it a not-for-profit, because the funds that you receive then go straight into, your social action projects. But also as well, if you were able to bring more funding in through ACS, it means that you wouldn't need to rely solely on volunteers, but you could also have paid staff that are part of your teams. And so I just want to put this there as something to think about, and challenge the way in which we have done ACS so successfully in the past, but how we can continue to strengthen and widen our reach for ACS in the future.